the God of the Bible, the Lord, the beings that present themselves within the confines of these books, the Old Testament, New Testament, the Quran for the Muslims, the Torah for the Jews, and the New Testament for the Christians, partly because information that the world has accepted for the last 6,000 years as it relates to religion, relates to these translations of the Bible, of the Quran, and the interpretations and translations that is given to the world, printed, disseminated amongst people who are seeking the truth. Oftentimes, there seems to be a confusion in the understanding of these texts, and partly because many people speak many different languages globally, and therefore when you read the already translated books, fundamental English is read in the Bible. Most popularly known translation, King James. And as we addressed previously in the last class, uncovering this God and this Lord and understanding his character or their character, that there is a plurality in these books. There's plural plural form of the word El, Elohim, Elo, Allah, Allahumma, the various languages, Arabic and Hebrew, Galilean Arabic and the Hebrew tongue, stemming from older languages. But when you deal with the basic related to English, but what they're not teaching the religious world, what they're hiding from our people, is what they're translating these words from, the language that they are translating them from. When you look at the history of the Bible, you see that most of these English versions were not translated directly from the Hebrew. They came from the Latin, the Vulgate, the Vulgate. And there's many types or versions of the Latin that came from ancient Hebrew. The words Lord, the word God, the word combination, compound word Lord God, whether it's uppercase, lowercase, is it the same meaning? Does God mean the same as the word Lord? Is it interchangeable? How would you know? And what character is being spoken of within these books? What being? If there is a plurality and there is a group of beings, as you will see right there, the word Elohim, you will see that it's a plural for gods or judges. In these books in Exodus, where it speaks and says that this Lord God or this God is jealous of other gods. And sometimes translators, way before any of you were born, knew that there were no upper and lower cases in the Semitic languages. Therefore, to make a distinction in the translation, they would often change in the English the uppercase to lowercase to denote a difference in the Hebrew. But the difference is not distinguishable because it's the same principle as if you use the word apple in the beginning of a sentence. In the uppercase you would use, and lowercase apple in the middle of a sentence. It doesn't change the definition. The same thing when you use the word God in the beginning of a sentence, or to denote superiority, and then someone says, see, this is a lowercase g, which means that it is a what? Lesser God. No, that's not the case in the ancient Semitic languages. They actually used a different word. And because you don't speak the language, right? And we don't, the leaders of these religious doctrines or forums, churches, mosques, or synagogues, they don't address it because they don't speak the language. So mostly people who are receiving this information is confused. So in our last address, when we addressed this character, we found out, you'll see that the Lord pops up in chapter 2 when things are needed to be done specifically, such as using the physical earth to create this new being, physical dust, water, mud, clay, to create this man, or mold or shape this man. You need to physically grab the earth by hand to mold and shape this being, which we will address in another class, the actual creation of the genetic part. So we'll touch generally on this Lord and how he behaves, or how they behave, and how this Lord title is interchangeable. Where we found out that this Lord, or this God, right, was responsible for man in a way that, in order to show that he had dominance over this new being, or control this new being, this Adamite group or race or new species, had to show obedience through the form of various sacrifices. And what's ironic is that you'll see many different types of beings in Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, through the Old Testament, all the way down to Malachi, right? In the book of Job, the book of Kings, Second Kings, Deuteronomy, Leviticus, you see that there's different lords here, and different characters, and different types of beings that are interacting with man throughout this book, where we found out that this Lord actually was requiring sacrifices, and was requiring human beings to even partake and eat of these sacrifices, whether they were animals or human beings. And this is going to shock. This is very shocking to the world, because this is something that has never been taught. Our master teacher, Dr. Malachi Kobina York, right? Nana Yananin Panabab Yanun, our incarnated spiritual guide on this planet to the race of all Nagaru, Negroids, Africans, have yet to receive the right knowledge and right information taught to us for us. And so what he is teaching us here is showing us that the gods of the Bible, the lords there, are a different species of beings. They're a different type of what you call extraterrestrial, an extra being, or extra beings that travel to Terra, or Tira, Earth, astrally through the stars. So these beings that most religious doctrines label as angels are, in fact, from a practical perspective and definition, extraterrestrials. There's a lot of talk about extraterrestrials in the news, in public forums and social media. They're speaking about beings coming down to the planet, intermingling with men, various men, women, various species. Some species have different intelligent capabilities. They have the ability to, some incarnate, some use other people's bodies. Some have the ability to dematerialize and become ether, a certain type of ether where they are invisible, right? And so you find out throughout these books where men, they pop up and appear in places, and human beings don't know where they came from, how far they traveled. It's spoken of throughout the religious world, particularly even with Muslims. They speak about how Gabriel, this being, traveled, and he had on a white robe and appeared to Muhammad without the appearance of a traveler. These beings, many non-religious recordings of extraterrestrials that have appeared to human beings in their rooms, in the field, right? Some travel through crafts. Most of them travel intergalactically through the heavens, commonly interpreted as the heaven, as one place, when science and, of course, astrologists and astrobiologists have acknowledged that the universe is very, very vast. Galaxies exist, billions of galaxies exist. So the percentage of life form or aliens or extraterrestrials is very, very, very high. But when you read these books, the religious books, you'll find out that these extraterrestrials interactions are recorded. And when the translators identified the various species, they just translated it as Lord. Oh, this is a Lord there. Raphaim, spoken of in First Chronicles 26, a race of old giants. They call them Raphaim. These beings had 6 fingers, right? But you'll see it says Lord. In the siege of Samaria in Second Kings, they spoke about these lords and these gods coming. These beings want sacrifices. And they even told them to sacrifice thy daughters and thy sons. That's in Second Kings, and in Exodus it speaks about it as well. Psalms 106, it speaks about the Canaanites sacrificing their sons and daughters. You'll see that this being is constantly making sacrifices and requiring these human beings to do the same thing. Second Kings chapter 6, and it reads, in the siege of Samaria, it says, verse 27, and he said, if the Lord do not help thee, whence shall I help thee? Out of the barn floor or out of the winepress? Take note of that word, winepress. And the king said unto her, what aileth thee? And she answered, this woman said unto me, give thy son that we may eat him today, and we will eat my son for tomorrow. For we boiled my son and did eat him. And I said unto her on the next day, give thy son that we may eat him, and she hath hid her son. Now, this is just one instance of the Bible requiring or requesting human beings to boil or kill their children. Abraham was asked to do the same thing. When you go to Genesis, right, Genesis 22:5 specifically, he lied to Isaac about the sacrifice. He actually told Isaac that, hey, I'm going to worship, to ease Isaac's mind or heart. And he actually went and grabbed sticks. So he didn't inform them what he was doing. So making sacrifices to this Lord or to this being was a secret. It wasn't something that was known to everyone, because everyone didn't have the responsibility or make a covenant with those beings. Everyone wasn't allowed to see these giants, these Nephilim, right? Or Anakites or Anakim, Anak or Anunnaki. They weren't allowed to see these beings because they would be frightened. If you go to Numbers 13 speaks about how these beings were considered giants in the earth. And they actually were looking to devour these people. The report of the spies in chapter 13, it says, 27, and they told him and said, we came unto the land whither thou sentest us, and surely it floweth with milk and honey, and this is the fruit of it. Nevertheless, the people be strong that dwell in the land, and the cities are walled and very great. And moreover, we saw the children of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south, and the Hittites, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and by the coast of Jordan. So this is a land, he's describing the different tribes that live there. And most of these are Canaanite tribes. The Jebusites is one of the tribes of, or one of the sons of Canaan. These were Adamites. These were Caucasian. Their description is in Leviticus. The Hittites were also a tribe of the Canaanites. The Amorites are also a tribe of the Canaanites. The Amorites are the mountain dwellers. The Canaanites, as a group, they dwelled in by the sea on the east coast of Jordan. And if you go down to 32, and they brought up an evil report of the land. So this is being reported from this particular territory, which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, the land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are the men of great stature. 33. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come of the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight. So this is where these beings were being eaten, another form of proof of the actual eating of human beings on the planet. These sacrifices were not just done by for loyalty in a sense of loving or caring to these lords. They were done out of an obligation because they were bred for a specific reason. And we'll get into the breeding of the Adamite at another class. That's why you should tune in and make sure you tune into this station, right? The breeding of the Adamite and how and who they were being bred by, what beings they were being bred by, and the purpose and the genes that was used in the genetic breeding. When you look at the various races and the characteristics, and you see the red hair, brown eyes and brown hair, or you see blue eyes and blonde hair, or red hair and green eyes and freckles. And then you have beings with hair all over their backs and different blood types, A positive, B positive, RH negative, RH positive. The genetics of different species on the planet that don't mix with each other. So you know, scientists that understand this certain doctrines, certain information, they don't know how to tie it into religious doctrine or religious information, but it all ties as one. It all works together. And so the breeding process of these beings and why they were on the planet it shows in these books to the purpose that they're asking sacrifices from these human beings, and even requesting that they give them right from the womb. Literally, it uses the word matrix, and that word matrix comes from, when you're reading Exodus 34:19, you'll see that this Lord also requires what? Fresh fruit from the womb of human beings, and they hide it in the word matrix. All that opened the matrix is mine. This is the Lord speaking. Let's go back to verse 18. The feast of unleavened bread shalt thou keep. 7 days shalt thou shalt eat unleavened bread, as I commandeth thee. This is the Lord, this Lord speaking, this particular Lord. In the time of the month Abib, for in the month Abib thou camest out of Egypt. All that opened the matrix, 19, is mine, and every firstling among my cattle, whether ox or sheep, that is mine. So this is speaking of an actual womb where they use matrix, but the word matrix is raham or raham. It's in the Hebrew. You won't see it if you don't read it, but it speaks about this. If you go back to 15, you see the covenant in verse 15 of the same chapter 34. Lest thou make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and they go a whoring after their God, and do sacrifices unto their gods, and one call thee, and thou eat of his sacrifice. So these sacrifices are made to be eaten. They're not just sacrificing and the flesh or blood is left there. These are eaten by these flesh-eating beings, right? If you go down also, further down to Numbers, or we read Numbers, right? First Kings, right, 18, it speaks about how they get the attention of these lords. It's not pleasant to hear this because most people say, hey, I've been praying All of this time, I've been praying to this Lord. I ask for things to happen, and sometimes it happens. If you look on the planet, though, there's the things that's taking place on the planet is continuous from the behaviors of this book. In all walks of life, every religious doctrine teaches you to sacrifice in some way. And then when a person dies or things happen to church, they actually thank this being because, oh, it could have been worse. Or thank God that I'm alive. But 4 people die in a car accident and you thank God that you are alive. If you're giving that attribute that God kept you alive or this Lord kept you alive, you're saying that he also killed the other 4 people or other 3 people. If you thank this Lord for a beautiful baby being born, right, then you also have to acknowledge that he's responsible for the growth of babies in the womb. I'm saying the logic behind it, the reasoning behind it. So if you say that he's responsible for the birth of beautiful babies, and people celebrate, and by all means, there is a divine power that is responsible for the birth of beautiful babies. But then who's responsible for deformities? Who's responsible for Siamese twins? Who's responsible for stillborns and hydrocephalic children, or children born with no limbs? Is the same God responsible for these birth defects or these atrocities on the planet? So this religious God has crept its way into the minds of people without us questioning where and how this being is born, how his character is addressed in these books, and what is actually in these books in order to see exactly who and what we're worshiping. Cannibalism is accepted in 2 Kings 6, chapter 6, verse 28 and 29. Also in Lamentations 4:10. Right? Ezekiel's 5:10 speaks about the acceptance of cannibalism. When you speak about these beings coming down to earth, you'll see in Psalm 68:14 through 18, you'll see hundreds of these beings coming down by the thousands. So if you begin to read it, and hopefully you'll understand closely what we're trying to address here on this channel of actual facts, and understanding who and what this God is, we'll be able to identify exactly who and what our gods are as Nagaru, as our ancestors speak to us through this doctrine, through the reasoning mind that we were blessed with, to question what was given, to question the things that we have accepted without actually taking a look at it, saying, hey, wait a minute. I read about a mermaid in the Bible. Do mermaids exist? Yes, you can read it in 1 Samuel chapter 5, verse 2 through 7. It speaks about a half man, half fish called Dogon or Dagon. Literally says it in the Hebrew. Also a goat man, Sair, in Leviticus 17:7. If you read Job 39:10, you'll see it speaks about who? A unicorn. 39:10 literally uses the word unicorn. And the giants we just touched on in Numbers 13:33. 1 Chronicles 26, the race of old giants. That goes back into Genesis as well, where it speaks about the Nephilim that came down, all descendants of these beings, these sons of these gods who came down from the heavens and raped females. And in their raping of females, they gave birth to these demigods who were evil continuously. And you wonder, if you look on the planet, you'll see descendants of these beings and how they destroyed human beings and they drowned human beings and killed and ate them right in their own areas and own environments, to where they had to sacrifice on a religious schedule, religious basis, a scheduled time, in order for them not to eat up the entire valley or entire town or city of inhabitants, these Levitical priests was responsible for actually serving them their food when they came to this planet. And this is why it speaks about this harvest. It speaks about a harvest that will take place. If you go to Revelations and you read, you'll see that this harvest speaks about this Lord coming in the last day, this being coming in the last day to harvest human beings. And in the harvesting of human beings, he says, thrust in thy sickle so that the harvest is ripe. And they make this harvest in comparison to a wine press, because the blood is drained from the same way you do a chicken, the same way you do a bull. These beings do that to humans. They drain the blood, symbolic of the wine press, and remove the inwards, the same way you do animals when you have them at these slaughterhouses. There's a process in how you process the meat. And so the religious world has used this process and say, oh, this is lawful. This is halal, the Muslims say, or this is kosher. But we were not flesh eaters. You don't have the canine teeth or the claws or the running ability to chase down a cow, rip open its skin, rip its inwards out, and feast on a cow. You don't have the uric acid first enough in your body to dissolve raw meat. You don't have the teeth to tear into its flesh, and you don't have the claws to capture or bite into it or cut into its skin. So you're not carnivorous by nature. So you're not a flesh eater by nature. You don't have canines. If you see certain races, they have extended canine in their mouths because they are designed to eat flesh. And oftentimes you see the Caucasian race and other races, such as the Edomites or Asians, that will eat steak practically rare. They say, well, give it to me rare. That's a nice way of saying raw. The reason why they say rare is because rare meat, they burn it on one side, burn it on the other, or cook it for a few minutes on one side, flip it over, cook it on the other side. But when you cut it open, they warmed it enough to warm the meat inside, because it's the closest thing to cannibalism as they can imagine. And, you know, typically Africans be like, ew, that's disgusting, because it's not in your nature to do. But because these Adamites, this Mukasu, this Caucasian race was bred with other types of species that are of a lesser physical etheric matrix as you, meaning they're not designed to be genetically to live and behave the same way, because of the interbreeding of the gibbon, the orangutan, and certain other animals that bred this particular species. This was a breeding process. And so you'll see why and how, when you look at the planet from the perspective of these various Elohim and the giants, the Nephilim, or the cherubim and the seraphim, they are part of a specific race of extraterrestrials that are responsible for this group of newly created beings of 6,000 years ago. And they were cursed with leprosy. Leviticus 13:11 speaks about this curse, where they were made pale, they were made to be white with diseases, and cast into Turkey and the Caucasus Mountains. They began to walk on all fours, and they spread throughout Europe into these tan lands: Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan. You had these different areas where they settled in cold environments, which was conducive for their skin disease, leprosy, the disease conditions that they had. The cold environment would keep their skin from rotting totally away, the same way you put flesh or animal into the freezer. A cold environment keeps the bacteria and the viruses that they carried from severely multiplying and being transmitted amongst the people or who they came in contact with. This is why the priest would often, Levitical priests would often shut them up, check on their pores, check on their condition, check on the scab and the boils, and if it was a rising in the skin, they would say shut them up for 7 days, quarantine them for 7 more days. They take them out. If the scabs or scales was deeper than the skin inside the hair and it was contagious, they would put them away for 7 more days. And if they come out clean and it wasn't contagious, then they can walk amongst others. But because of their killing, their ego, their animalistic behaviors, their flesh and blood lust, thirsty of killing and wars and raping and enslavement and the atrocities that you've seen historically committed against other races, they were banished out of Africa because the Nagaru, the Africans, were protected by our ancestors, Panatharu, and we were given a divine seed that preserved our genetics through the mitochondria from the mother, passed down from mother to son and daughter, right, to protect us on this planet in the right environment. So because of their behaviors, the Caucasian race, and their time to rule, which was only 6,000 years, look at the creation of Adamic books, you see there's only 6,000 years. This is why it's a very short history of their existence. They don't have thousands and thousands of years or millions of years worth of history because they were so called in the Dark Ages, which is more so a racist statement because they try to denote dark as negative, but actually it was dark because they had no introduction to light or electricity, and they lived in a dark, cold environment in the caves, ate raw flesh, and had sex with animals. This is where bestiality comes from. But my point is, you have to acknowledge, right, as a race, that there's classifications of beings, just like there's classifications of species from a scientific mind. And if you look at the genetics of our people and the genetics of the other races, you will see that we all could not have come from one person. We could not have come from Adam, because if Eve came from Adam, that would mean Eve would be the same blood type. That would mean Cain and Abel and their descendants would be the same blood type. You cannot say that Eve come from Adam and Adam was Eve's mother and father. So she did not have the combination of 23 chromosomes from each, which gives the human being 46. She had the same chromosomes as Adam, and Cain and Abel had the same chromosomes as them. So there was no alteration. That would mean that they all would look alike. They will all have the same genetics. They will all have the same blood. There will be no variation or difference if they all come from one person. The Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible teaches that there was an experiment that took place amongst a group of beings, and there was another group of beings in a specific land of Nod that were also doing evil and causing mischief and shedding blood and killing there as well. They never mention about the African race, because it was not recorded in Mesopotamia. We had our own records of existence. We had our own records of time, where we understood thousands of years ago. We built monuments on different energy grids that activated and connected us to the heavens through certain points on the planet, and certain pyramid structures that existed throughout Egypt, China, the Bermuda Triangle areas with Mu and Atlantis, and different lost cities, because we were connected through a specific grid that only the ancient ones knew, that were marked to connect these grids and gave us a certain energy. So we understood genetics then, because we were breeding certain animals to create hybrids. And we understood genetics and DNA and the base pairs of the chromosomes and the difference in the various species on the planet, how the various DNA structures and amino acids would develop into certain organs and create that type of animal or plant or what have you. So we understood that, and we understood that the Caucasian and his race was a different breed that was not allowed into Africa. This is why you only see them penetrating the outer coast of Africa. They never really penetrated the inside of Africa. One, it was too hot. Two, the mosquitoes and the malaria would kill them very fast. Their immune systems were weak, and the non-ether potency of Africa did not accept or rejected 6-ether and its weakness. And this is why darkness dominates. Africa as a dark continent dominates the light, just like space dominates the light. It doesn't matter how many suns are shining, the darkness always prevails. And this is where the intelligence comes from. So the darkness was first. God was according to them, even in darkness before he created the light. Therefore, intelligence is in darkness first. The intelligence in creation is done in the womb of the mother in triple darkness. Just this space gives birth to planets and houses the seed of the universe, which are your planets. The womb houses the seeds of human beings within the space of the womb. As a orb or a round circular ball, seed and spins, just like planets spins and suns spin within darkness. All of it is related, but this was the creation of our existence as Afafare Kao, not the existence or the creation of the Caucasian and his race. It is not racism. Don't take this as racism. These are facts. That Bible is their book. They always kept you out of it. Only when they wanted to prove a certain point, they'd say, oh yeah, we went into Egypt to show that they had a certain intellect or certain information, but you were not a part of that book. This was a Mesopotamian doctrine. That's why when you read the ancient Hebrew and you look in the Strong's Concordance, you'll see that these words are Chaldean Hebrew words, because Abraham was a Chaldean. And he came from Ur or Chaldea, an area in Mesopotamia in Babylon. And in Babylon and Mesopotamia, right, they worshipped a god called Mazda. And they say it was the god of fire. Why? Because they understood fire was the only source of life for a cold environment. They didn't have electricity, so they depended on fire for everything. And if you brought fire, then you were worshipped. That's why if you look at a lot of those old mankind or caveman movies, the first thing, the most powerful leader of the clan or group, he was the fire bearer, right? He had a torch, or he knew how to use a certain stone, certain dry bush, spark it together, create a spark, and poof, you have fire. Now you can cook. Now you can heat your food and cook and warm your house or your hut or your cave, and therefore you could survive. So they made fire synonymous with survival or living in natural nature, right? In our existence in ancient Tamare or the lands of the Sabaeans, which were pre-Egypt, pre-dynastic, in Kush, that was all one land. You'll see it in the southern peninsula of Saudi Arabia. In that land, we acknowledge that the sun was the living ether entity and the creator, the grower, the physical representation of the creator in this universe. Because it doesn't matter. It didn't matter to us. If that sun didn't shine, no one would exist. So we knew that was the highest potent representation of and the closest thing to the divine that we knew. This is why throughout their books, they acknowledge the sun as the shield, or the sun as the sun of righteousness with healing in its wings in Malachi. So to get to the point of this breeding, back to the genetics of this Caucasian in his race, and his creation and his breeding, it was only 6,000 years ago. And you have to understand why and who bred these beings and for what purpose. Then you'll understand why the destruction is coming to them the way that it's coming. Why World War III, the diseases, COVID, the plagues, the economic fallout, and the destruction of his system, Babylon falling as it speaks of in Revelations 18, and the New World Order, and the microchips, and economic wars, computer wars, different types of war fronts, biological warfare, embargoes and sanctions, and attempted to retain control over the world is because their time is up. Not because of anything religious, it's because that they've been marked with a certain time of rule. The same way, when you look at the seasons on this planet, in this universe, there's cycles of existence, and there's cycles of life, and there's cycles of death. And then the cycles of death, things die, plants die, seasons die, species die. Some species die by natural causes. There's thousands of species on this planet that are no longer existing. Why? Because it was their time to go. And there's no difference between human beings. Human beings have a time where they have, not all, not the supreme, but this race, where nature is saying, not Duswa York, not Dr. Malachi Z.K. York, not, natural nature. No one is responsible for a tree growing except nature. You may benefit from that tree. You may benefit from the plants and the herbs and the fruit that nature provides, but natural nature has an order and is in control of a certain cycles, and that includes the existence of human beings. So I'll do my best to give you this knowledge and put it out there as we have been requested to do, to assist our ancestors to assist the master teacher in his job in breaking the spell over and off of the Nagardo race, and wakening your minds up to the real you and who you really are, and not what you have